welcome. Thank you for clicking on this video. If you're new here, my name is Anne. If you're not new, welcome back, my friends. In today's video, we are talking about my Alaska cruise tips and tricks, things I learned on our vacation. We had a 7-day Alaskan cruise. We also had a day in Vancouver before returning home to Colorado. We went at the very beginning of June, so the first 10 days of June, so the weather was relatively nice. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but our itinerary essentially looked like this. First, we flew to Anchorage. Then we took the Alaskan Railroad down to Seward, where we got on our celebrity cruise ship Millennium. Then we took the Millennium down the Alaskan coast, first stopping in Juneau, then Skagway, Icy Strait, and Ketchikan. We also had a couple of sea days in there, and we disembarked in Vancouver. So the first thing really involves kind of weather, essentially, and packing for the weather and what that kind of looks like. So it's important to keep in mind that the more northern you are in Alaska, that's where you kind of see those longer hours of daylight. So when we were in Anchorage, it was pretty sunny outside all the time. There was about 4 hours during the middle of the night where it was sort of like dusk. The rest of the time was sunny. That being said, though, as you head down the coast, the daylight and, you know, night to day ratio returns to relatively normal. But it was interesting to me that it was a lot warmer the more southern you were in Alaska versus more northern. So when we were in Anchorage, it was relatively chilly, but as we got down to Ketchikan, it was pretty nice. You probably could have worn shorts. So what that means is that when you're packing, obviously go for that layers kind of thing. Make sure that you have some jackets to put on top of you. I took a parka, a raincoat, gloves, and then a little like band to go over my ears. I did use the parka a couple of times, particularly when we were in Anchorage. Icy Strait Point was a little bit chilly, and then when we were kind of cruising around the Hubbard Glacier, I did put my parka on. The rest of the time, though, I found that my raincoat was sufficient in terms of warmth, and I didn't need to bring my parka with me. I also never used the gloves. We are from Colorado, so we are used to some chilly weather, so I didn't think that the gloves were necessary. The ear wrap, though, definitely, I use that almost every day because it really helps with the wind. There was a lot of wind, and so your ears can get kind of chilly in the wind, and I used that quite a bit. I also brought a baseball cap. I didn't end up using that, and I didn't bring a beanie. I didn't feel like I needed one. In terms of my outfits and what I packed, I'll put a couple of pictures so that you can sort of see, but essentially I followed an outfit formula. So each day I had a pair of yoga pants or a pair of jeans. They were full length. Then I had like a thinner top, like a crop top or a short sleeve t-shirt or a tank top. And then on top of that, I had like an overlay, which may have been like a flannel or a shacket or something that I could button up and do up in case I was cold. For most of the days, aside from a time where it was relatively chilly and I needed my parka, most of the time I was able to just bring my raincoat with me. If I got chilly, I would button up my flannel and then I would put the raincoat on, and I was fine. I would recommend bringing a parka for those days that it's a little bit cold, but I don't think it was something that I necessarily needed to bring. I had a sweatshirt like this one, and I definitely could have layered with that as well. My husband didn't even bring a parka, and he was fine. So I think if you're from a warmer climate, perhaps like a Florida or Georgia, and you're not super used to the cold, it may behoove you to bring a parka. However, if you have relatively chilly winters, snow, etc., then I think just the layering is fine. On that same vein, I wish that I had brought more yoga pants and less jeans. I brought a fair few pairs of jeans because I assumed that I would want to use the jeans when I was in town, going through the town, kind of looking at all the shops and things like that. But I actually found that the yoga pants were a lot easier to use. They were a lot more transitional if I was walking or hiking or shopping around town. The jeans often were just a little bit too stiff when I wanted to transition from shopping to hiking to walking. And the other benefit to the yoga pants was that those were also perfect for the sea days when I felt like kind of lounging around a little bit. I didn't necessarily want to dress up or anything for the sea days. It was nice to just have a pair of yoga pants that I could sort of use for lounging, watching TV, sitting on the balcony, etc. I also think having like a sweatshirt or like a large oversized shirt, something like that that you can use on those more casual days for around the ship would be beneficial as well, because you're on the ship, you don't necessarily want to wear anything stuffy or too formal unless of course it's formal night, but during the day you can just kind of relax, hang out, and I would have a comfy outfit for that. So next, seasickness and what our experience was with being seasick. So we ended up taking some packets of Trader Joe's like ginger juice mix. We also took a bottle of ginger, just the ginger, the ground ginger you can buy at the store. I found that taking that bottle of the ground ginger was the most beneficial thing. The little juice mix that we got from Trader Joe's didn't dissolve very well. And so I actually preferred using the powdered ginger from the grocery store. You could just pour a little bit of that in your orange juice in the morning if you were feeling seasick, and it would make you feel a lot better the rest of the day. In terms of seasickness, I had never been on a ship before, and so the first few days were a little bit rough. I did struggle kind of getting used to the swaying of the ship, and there was one day in particular where at night it was relatively rocky. We were like rolling over around in our bed because it was pretty rocky. So having that ginger was absolutely a lifesaver for us. My husband also used the ginger, and he doesn't get as nauseous as I usually do, so I'm glad that we both used that and had that, and I would absolutely recommend bringing that whether or not you generally get seasick. We also had some Bonine on that night where it was really rocky. I did take the Bonine, I'm not really sure how you say that, and it did help me feel a little bit better. Next, something to keep in mind that I didn't really think about ahead of time is that currency exchange can take a little bit of time. So if you're like me and you are a AAA member, I knew that you could go into AAA, you could exchange some currency, and then I assumed you could just walk out with the currency. It used to be like that, but that was like 20 years ago. So when I went to AAA the day before our vacation, they were like, unfortunately, it takes several days for you to get your currency back. So we didn't end up going with any Canadian dollars. We didn't have time. It was the day before we were set to leave, and I could not get currency exchanged quick enough before it was time to leave. As such, we used our credit card, and then we also used a debit card. Now, our credit card is like a travel card. We were able to use it on the ship, in Canada, anywhere that we needed. I didn't have to tell the company that we were traveling. It was never declined. It worked fabulous. There was one instance in which I used my debit card, and this was in Canada. When I came back, I noticed on my bank statement there was a fee. It was like an exchange fee that my bank had assessed to me from having to convert that Canadian dollar charge into a US dollar charge. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are planning on using your debit card, I would definitely call your bank and make sure there's no currency exchange fees. That being said, I would just recommend using a credit card anyways, because with a credit card, you can often, if something happens and you lose your credit card, you can often just pull up your phone and you can disable the card. That way nobody can use it. I would recommend bringing some currency, which we failed at completely. So if you are planning on exchanging currency, I think do it anywhere between like 2 weeks to at least a week before you leave. So in terms of phone service and connection and all those types of things, I did buy the basic package for Wi-Fi while I was on the ship. After I got on the ship, I was struggling with it a little bit. My phone wasn't sending any text messages, and when I went to customer service, they told me that the Wi-Fi package only includes messages from certain message apps. So for example, Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, WhatsApp. You can't use your iPhone messaging on the Wi-Fi. So I bought the Wi-Fi so that I could communicate with my brother and his girlfriend because they were watching our dogs, and I wanted to be able to text them and just make sure that everything was good and check in with them. And I wasn't even able to use my iPhone message on the Wi-Fi. Had I known that, I definitely would not have purchased the Wi-Fi package. I think that if you were somebody who wanted to scroll, you wanted to post to social media, etc., then the Wi-Fi package would be useful for you. If you were a user of WhatsApp and different kinds of messaging apps like that, Wi-Fi would work for you. Since I didn't really care if I was on social media and I don't use WhatsApp, I found it sort of useless, and it was an expense that I wish I hadn't paid for. That being said, because we were in Alaska, which is of course like covered in terms of like my basic phone plan, when we were in port, most of the time I had service. So I was able to text in port, I was able to scroll social media if I wanted to, I was able to make calls. So because we were able to dock and then I was able to check in, it ended up working out fine. The only exception to that was of course when we were in Vancouver. We did pay to have this like day pass added to our line. So it was like a global travel pass. You pay an additional $10 per day, and then you're supposed to have international service. That didn't really work, honestly. The service was pretty shoddy. Like sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And there was a point when we had to order a lift and we couldn't walk away from this spot because it would like drop service. So we ended up having to grab a drink at this bar, sit at the bar while we ordered the lift. And then when the lift said here, we had to like book it over to the pickup spot, because we didn't want to like leave the bar and remove the Wi-Fi and then like not be able to communicate with the Lyft driver. So I haven't traveled internationally in a very long time. I've traveled once to England, but that was something I didn't really think about in terms of like service. I assumed that if we had the international service, it would work. So that really made me grateful for places where you could get on the Wi-Fi, like different bars and cafes. And if you are planning an international trip, just keep that in mind. And I would also maybe map out different places that you might visit that you can jump on their Wi-Fi so that you can order like any sort of car service that you want, Uber, Lyft, etc. You can like message with friends, you can do whatever you want, because you may not have that option if your service, like ours, was a little bit shoddy. In terms of the actual cruise and the cruise ship, this was our very first time taking a cruise. It was an interesting experience. I'm glad that we went. We ended up going with Celebrity, which is a little bit of a higher end cruise ship compared to like Royal Caribbean or Carnival. It was a good experience. Everything was very nice. Everything was very fancy. Our cabin was absolutely stunning. And it was a nice experience. It felt very luxe. There were a few things that didn't really cater to my and my husband's interests, and so because of that, if we take a cruise again, we'll probably pick a different cruise line. So the first thing is that the food for us in the buffet really wasn't as great as I was expecting. It was like kind of a basic cafeteria food, and there was very limited selection, particularly during dinner. I think because a lot of people went to the dining room for dinner. There was like one section of the buffet open for dinner, and that was it. And so it was a little bit hard sometimes to find something that I wanted to eat because it was such a minimal selection and it wasn't like that great. That being said, the dining room was relatively good. The food was okay in the dining room. There was a lot of different interesting options that maybe you don't eat every day. There was like veal, duck, escargot, lots of steak, lobster for an additional charge, different kinds of things like that. When my husband and I did eat in the dining room, it was a pleasant experience. Our waiter was great. You had unlimited bread. They like brought bread and butter and it was fabulous. But that being said, like service in the dining room takes a while. Sometimes we just didn't really feel like getting our fancy clothes on, going to the dining room and spending all that time in the dining room. So that was the times when we would go to the buffet. But each time we went to the buffet, we were relatively disappointed. The only exception there is breakfast. Breakfast was pretty good in the buffet. They had waffles. They had like all kinds of meats and sausages and potato wedges. They had grits, hash, a whole bunch of different fruit, all those kinds of things like that. And the food in the buffet and the food in the dining room for breakfast was very similar. If you're looking to eat in the buffet, I'd recommend doing that in the morning, and then I would save the dining room for dinner. On that same vein, I wish that I had budgeted a little bit more to eat in port. So what we ended up doing was we would eat dinner in the buffet, we would go in port, we'd usually eat lunch in the port, and then we'd have dinner in the dining room or the buffet. And it was a great opportunity for us to sort of explore the little towns. We went to a lot of different breweries, we tried a lot of different local brews. It was great. That was a really nice time to kind of see the town and get all that touristy stuff out. That being said though, sometimes it was nice to just pop into a brewery, sit down for a beer and not even eat. Or if we wanted like some treats here and there or whatever. I think eating in the ports is really where you got that fresh seafood, those local brews, all those kinds of things. And so while the food on the cruise was technically included in your fare, I would rather have planned more time to eat in the ports. The second thing that we experienced was that a lot of the onboard activities didn't really vibe with me and my husband and like what we wanted to do. There was a lot of activities. There was live music, there was trivia, there was a lot of different like giveaway things like art auctions, different kinds of like stage show productions and things like that. There was a casino. There was a lot of opportunity to purchase very high-end items like the art auction. There was like diamond stores all over the ship, really luxury handbags and things like that. And we just really weren't into that. We were more into the cruise to go to the ports. And so while we were on the ship, there wasn't a lot of activities that I felt like catered to us. During our port days, really the only things that we did were the live music, the trivia, and then we would kind of just sit on our balcony and hang out. I think if you're into gambling, art auctions, things like that, then this would definitely be an interesting experience for you and you would have a lot of fun. I think next time we take a cruise, I would like to book it with a cruise line that maybe has a little bit more onboard options, like maybe like a water slide, cart, go-karts, different kinds of things like that that my husband and I would want to do. Cruising in general, and particularly this cruise line in this destination, really catered towards an older audience, sort of an older demographic. So for example, you know, Alex and I are late 20s, early 30s. And we were definitely the youngest people on the ship. Most people were like 60s, around there. So I think that the cruise line catered to the interests of that sort of demographic, and it didn't so much cater towards the demographic that maybe me and my husband are, or if we had children with us or things like that. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're booking your cruise. Everybody on the cruise was so nice. I think that I underestimated how nice people are on the cruise. The staff were phenomenal. All of the passengers on the ship were super nice. They all wanted to chat with us. We would go and sit down and we'd be kind of sort of next to people and they'd be like, oh, hi, where are you from? We felt very popular. Everybody wanted to talk to us. If you are a little bit introverted like me and my husband are, you can't be on a cruise ship. So prepare yourself because everybody's gonna want to talk to you. So that wraps up my tips for an Alaskan cruise. If you have any questions, if you're planning a cruise, if you want to know more, please drop them below in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. I would love to help anybody who is interested in a similar vacation, answer your questions, give you my advice, whatever. Like I said, if you have any questions, drop them below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I will see you in the next one. Bye!